Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Conscious Living Show. My name is Patricia Hamilton, and I'm your host today. I'm also the editor of Conscious Living magazine. And if you're interested to learn more about expanding consciousness and awakening your personal journey of spirituality and health and healing, then I do recommend that you have a look at consciouslivingmagazine.com.au. You can subscribe to the magazine. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you will be able to listen and watch many more interviews that we have available, already recorded, and will be recording in the future. So it's a beautiful day here. The sun has come out, and I've got a fabulous guest on our show today. And her name is Inna Segal. And Inna is the author of many books. Probably the most famous one is The Secret Language of Your Body. She's a very gifted healer, and she's a pioneer in the field of energy medicine and human consciousness. The other books that she has written are The Secret Language of Your Soul, The Secret of Life Wellness, and The Secret Language of Color Cards. And this afternoon, we're going to talk about her latest book, which I've just been reading over the last couple of days. And it's called The Understanding Modern Spirituality. And it's an exploration of your soul and higher truths. And I have to say that it is a challenging read, and it's really invited me, and it's really made me question, actually, a lot of my assumptions and ideas about spirituality in my own life, and to look back on perhaps whether I could have actually delved a bit more deeply about certain concepts, ideas. And I'm sure that whoever's listening to this interview, if you do have a chance to look at the book and order the book, and just listening to us talking about some of the topics, I'm sure you're going to be also challenged and interested. So welcome, Inna.
Thank you, Patricia. And I think, as I said to you just before we got on to this exploration of this interview, you mentioned how, it stretched you and made you think differently and deeper. And for me, that's probably the biggest compliment, because that's exactly what I was trying to do with this book. So, which is, again, understanding modern spirituality. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so perhaps we could start with, perhaps you could share a little bit about your personal story, because I know that you've had a really interesting background and personal experiences, which you have incorporated into all of your work. So that's what I'm impressed about with you. It's not just theoretical. It really is coming from the depths of your own life experience. So I'm sure everyone would love to know a little bit more about you, how you began your work, and what is really, I guess, made you so committed. I think that's what comes across with when I read your work, and I hear other people who've done your courses, that you are so dedicated to assisting people to awaken and to heal themselves.
I think for me, it's so many different aspects of it, from the feeling of hopelessness and loss, especially when you have pain, a lot of pain in your life. And I think pain for some people is emotional, for other people it's physical. For me, it was a combination of physical pain that really got me started, as well as a lot of confusion about who I was in life, because essentially I wasn't I immigrated to Australia when I was 11, and it was this feeling of I don't know where I belong. And eventually I felt like that not knowing and that sense of like, who am I? And you know, feeling small because I didn't really know how to be myself, how to speak the language, how to be accepted in a culture that was the opposite of the culture that I came from, essentially. And my parents were also people who were struggling within their own relationship, within finding themselves in a new country. And so that eventually led to me having psoriasis all over my skin. It led to anxiety. It led to digestive issues where I just couldn't digest food. And the one that was the most painful was essentially I had this incredible lower back pain where I just would be walking and then I just couldn't walk anymore, or my body would kind of get stuck in one direction and then I couldn't move. And again, we came from a place of, you know, medicine is the way forward. And then I ended up, when I was 18, I kept seeing that I was getting worse and worse and worse. So medicine, physiotherapy, these types of things weren't really helping me. And I ended up meeting my first really serious partner, and he was very into all this spirituality and understanding things, and I was very skeptical because I kind of came from a really skeptical background of it. And I was you know, and he kind of went, let's go and see kinesiologist, let's go see chiropractor, let's go, you know, he was really trying to help me. And we got to a point where I was literally seeing somebody 5 days a week, and I'd get better for the time, you know, for the next 24 hours, 48 hours, and then I would revert back. And it was constant this reverting back that just made me feel so frustrated. And then I feel like with a lot of people, there's a turning point that can happen in their life, sometimes a breakdown. And for me, it was really this particular moment where I was in agony. I woke up, you know, where my body was twisted. I couldn't, you know, I couldn't be in my body. I was out of my body the whole time. And my partner at the time drove me to this chiropractor, and I'd been seeing this chiropractor for about a year at this point. And he came out of his office and he basically said, your body's stuck. And my response was, yeah, I know, but what are you going to do about it? And he was very silent, quiet, and he just said nothing. And I said, what do you mean nothing? And he said, your body wants to be stuck, go home. And it was really interesting because when I got there, I felt depressed, like I really did, and suppressed and just hopeless. And when he said that, I felt enraged, you know, like rage was, so I didn't feel, you know, the pain as much actually. But what happened was that on the way home, I made a decision to heal myself. I made a decision to take responsibility, essentially, and to find out what was going on with me, what created this twistedness in my back, what created this skin condition, what created, you know, why couldn't I digest food properly? And so I really felt like this thinking part of me, the feeling part, and my will to do something about it was aligned for the first time in my life. And when I got home, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I just went, you know what? I had done a lot of acting before. I know how to breathe. So I'm going to do breathing. I'm going to count backwards because my mind was so crazy with thoughts. And I'm just going to ask for divine help because I keep hearing about it, but I don't know 100% if it exists. You know, what is this divine help? And who are the divine beings? And when I did, expecting nothing to happen, there was a shift, and I felt this warmth and this golden light come through me. And I was like, I just knew something happened. And then I don't know where the thought came from, but it was like, I want to see my back. And from that moment, it was like this latent ability that I'd always had but didn't know how to use or what it was just opened up, and I could see my back and I could see exactly what was going on there. And then from there, I started to really communicate within my own soul, within my own, I think it's more the soul than the body, to be honest. The wisdom of the body came through my, through that communication with the soul, and enormous healing happened. And the next day when I woke up, and I got insight into my family, into my ancestry, into my grandparents, into my parents, into my inner child, into how I absorbed energy. It was huge for me. And then the next day, there was about 70% of the pain was gone. So I knew it wasn't finished, me doing this one off. And the next 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, I was literally, I hardly moved out of my bed because I was so scared the pain would come back. And I was just exploring with this communication. And I was like, oh my God, there's something amazing inside of me. What is it? And that created this incredible desire to know. And then I also had a huge trauma that happened to me, which was kind of something that I felt was very connected to my grandparents, especially my grandmother. She had lost a lot of family members in her when she was a 13-year-old girl. Her mother was killed, and her mother was saving her life, and she got shot for that. And she was part of, I always forget, it's 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, and they all died. And her mother was psychic. And her mother actually said to her, you're the only one who's going to survive this war. And my grandmother never really worked through the trauma of the loss. She just numbed it because she didn't know how to. And I had an experience where I had a baby who died. And that was so traumatizing in a way, but also so opening, where I was like, I remember that the time, and I was like, this will either destroy me or it will strengthen me. And I want to know where this baby has gone. I want to know this spiritual world. I want to know what it is. And that kind of opened the door to me just researching and learning and learning and learning, and wanting to find the answers that were not just channeled by someone or even seen by a medium. I wanted something that really spoke to me, that had, I don't like the word science really because of how it's used, but had almost that level of depth that you could go, wow, all the pieces fit. This makes sense to me. And so I started researching, and it's probably, a 20-year research project.
Wow.
So
That was incredible. So yeah, it sounds like, when you push to the extremes of whatever physical health issue or trauma, it can be a doorway to opening up to the other realms, to the spiritual realms. And I think that's what, you talk about in the book. We get too comfortable with where we are, and we get very, even with our concepts and ideas about spirituality. And if we don't want to have a trauma or a great illness, I'd like us to explore, how we can think more deeply about the spiritual world and our connection to that as human beings, as spiritual beings inhabiting a human body on the earth. Because, having been involved in the New Age as long as I have for the last 33 years, I've also worked and been involved with spiritual teachers. And I feel like there's, recently I was starting to become really skeptical and cynical about information and about the fact that a lot of people don't really question and don't really think deeply about situations, concepts, and ideas, but they're so willing to just accept something if it's offered, if it's being offered as a way through a particular issue or problem or you name it. But I really like the way that in this book you're asking us to dive much more deeply and to really question all of these aspects. And you say that higher truth can't be simple. So could you perhaps explore that a little bit more? What do you mean by that?
I feel like, and I'll just give you a little bit of background as well of my, in agreeing with you. For the first 10 years of me exploring healing and spirituality and what happens in the spiritual world, I really just kept getting this whole idea, it's just love. Everything's just love. There's no other thing. It's just love. And, there's truth in that. But for a lot of people, it's just a concept and an easy thing to weigh out. To just put spirituality and who we are into this little box. And I had this feeling, this sense, like when I was about 28 to 30 or so, I had this black hat on. And even though I was intuitive and I could tune into people, into their bodies and so on, and see things and be very accurate, I just felt like the spiritual world was not really accessible to me the way that I wanted it to be accessible. And I felt like, again, a lot of it was my concepts that came through a lot of the books that I was reading that basically said the same thing over and over and over again. And also people talking about it. And then I guess I had an opportunity where I ended up meeting this lady, who was in her 70s, and I went into her house to really ask her about this movement therapy that she was doing. So I had an appointment. And there was something about her house that was completely different. And I said to her, teach me, can you share with me more? And she was like, well, are you really ready? Because you're going to have to throw out everything you've learned. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready. And she said, look, I'm going to give you some reading material, and it's not new age. It's more like it comes from, I guess, the brotherhood, the secret brotherhood, so to speak, and mystery schools. And she said, would you be open to it? And there's a lot of resistance, I have to say. But then I started reading, and I had a lot of questions, and felt like so many of my ideas were surface based, even though I thought I was a very deep person. And I started asking, like, for example, with soul and the spirit, I thought it was the same thing. I put everything into the same kind of, I was like, well, yeah, I've had an experience with an angel or, and an archangel, but really I just want to go straight to God. I don't really want to know about those, this is fluffy. And there's a lot of things like that. And she explained to me why I needed to understand it, and that I had no real discernment. I had no real foundation of understanding spirituality. I didn't know, I knew there was shadow beings, but I didn't know how to pick them. I didn't know how to discern them. I didn't know how to know the difference even between them, because I was like, la, 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 everything's light and love. And she was like, it's not, it really isn't. And you need to know who's influencing you, which beings are influencing your thoughts and how, and, where's your sense of I am, your sense of self and your individuality, and why, and she explained, and I learned about the soul and all the different aspects of the soul and how the soul would evolve, and that the spirit was the eternal part of us. and the soul, you know, and it was kind of the higher self, the bigger picture, and that you had to awaken your higher self. It didn't just wake up because you thought about it, but because you thought you had a higher self, and that you had to work at it. You had to be a good person. You had to be, you know, you had to act in a beautiful, ethical, loving, real, you know, way, from real heart and integrity. And you had to face all your shadow aspects in that way. And you know that the soul is, a lot of people talk about, you know, I have an old soul, but it's not quite true. And you know, she explained, there was a lot of explanations, and also I learned a lot from Rudolf Steiner, that the soul was actually, you got a new soul every time you came here, which is why the church talks about, you know, you have a new soul, and they can say you don't have multiple earth lives because you just, you know, you're this soul. They don't explain why, and that this soul, this new soul that you have, is actually connected to the fact that you're, every new life that you experience, you have a new body, you have a new family, you're born in a new country, and that soul needs to be adjusted to it. I can't have the same soul that I had when I was, you know, in Africa and being a male, in the next life where I'm a female being born in Italy or wherever it is. It has to be transformed and adjusted to that time, to that place. But of course, the soul will bring old karma with it, which will have that old aspect to it. And then, you know, there was so much to learn about the astral body and the etheric body, and the different parts of the astral body, and what contained in it, and also who are the beings, you know, and what do they do, and you know, like an angel, and why do we need to learn about an angel or an archangel or an archi, or you know, and so on, opposed to, you know, let's just go to God. And you know, what was the reason? So it was like, oh, eye-opening and so deeply profound, and learning about just the evolution of humanity, the evolution of the soul, the different time periods, what they were, what was happening. And so it was like, yes, we have to learn to love, but it's so much more. And so much of it is also about freedom and individuality, individuality in a way that is unique and allows you to evolve yourself, and learning how to think for yourself. And, you know, and so it was like, just simplifying it doesn't do it for me, and shouldn't do it for most people, because it's so complex. We're so complex as beings.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and yeah, do you want to share a little bit more about angels, archangels, and the archi? Because I have never heard of that concept of the archi before. I've heard about angels having a personal guide, and archangels. So, what's your take on those three parts of the spiritual, well, say, architecture or cosmos that we are connected to, all of us individually and collectively?
Well, the angel, archangel, and archi are the closest spiritual beings to us.
Mm.
And our angel, and I really was challenged by hearing people explaining angels as genies, you know, because I was like, well, it just doesn't work for my understanding. And I realized that in learning that the angel is our guide, essentially, and the angel that actually comes with us in every life from the beginning, and holds the threads of karma and destiny. So, in other words, our destiny, and is always trying to guide us towards living our destiny and towards what the soul really believed, that the soul had an intention. Come here, and intention is to grow and learn, refine, evolve, work through past challenging relationships in particular, you know, and become deeper, become wiser, become freer as well. And the angel's role is really to keep us on track, and to be kind of like the parent, the beautiful, loving parent, always guiding if we also listen. And we, on the other hand, also impact the angel by what we do. So if we are, living in a horrible way, taking drugs, doing things that are destructive to ourselves, the angel is quite affected by this and the evolution of the angel. And so it was really quite amazing to learn that the angels also constantly giving us images for us to, as a whole world, to move towards something positive, but it's free choice whether we receive it or whether we block it out. And then we have and of course the angel can save us, and there have been things that have been said that are also similar to what I'm talking about, but the angel is there really to hold us in that flexibility of where we're going in this life. And then we have the archangel, and the archangel's role is to connect people together. And so right now, if I'm speaking to you, we have an archangel in between us that is actually creating that connection of communication within us, and that every country, every city in the world has a completely different archangel. The languages that we speak, the culture that we have, is connected to the influence of the archangel. And that's why I know for me, I've traveled a lot, and in certain places, I'm just like, oh my God, I just align with these people. And, and maybe it's other lives, but it's also like, I just feel home here. My body relaxes. I just love it. And other places, I'm just like, oh, get me out of here, because it's so different. And that's the role of the archangels, to create that a different culture, the uniqueness, the language, the way we see things differently, so that we can all grow. And then the Archi is they're called the zeitgeist. They're being that guides humanity of that time. And right now we're in a time where Michael, who's kind of gone from an archangel to, or is moving towards an archi in that process, who's guiding humanity. And that's why there's so much intuition and healing that's awakened in the last 100 years from people, more than previously, and people can talk about it and say it and so on. And so, yeah, the archi, their role is to move humanity forward and to be in charge, so to speak. And of course,
there's so much that you've covered in the book, which I really encourage people to read, because you've also got some really good transformational processes at the end of each chapter, which I felt was really beneficial. And at the end of the book, you've also got some other deeper processes, meditations to do with the shadow and forgiveness. And so it's I think it's like anything, it's not enough just to intellectually read and absorb ideas, but it's when you actually imbibe those through your own experiences and your own life, and you're really challenging us to look honestly at where you're at in your life, and to sort of face up to perhaps areas that you really haven't looked at before, because, as you say, it's, in this culture of the new age, it's very easy to sort of go for the fast, quick solutions, and to avoid looking more deeply and more slowly and carefully at all the relationships that you've created, and where you haven't forgiven people, and what is still holding you back. Because what I found interesting is that you are saying that unless you really understand more about the spiritual world, how are you going to handle that when you die, basically? So what I thought was also interesting was you asked this question, what happens when we sleep? And I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that, your understanding and what you've experienced yourself.
So when we have this astral body, which is the body of consciousness, which is quite connected to part of our soul, so to speak, and then we have the I am, and then we have the physical and etheric body. And during sleep, the astral body, which is why people have talked about astral traveling, and the I am, they go on a journey into the spiritual world. And depending on how you've lived that day, whether you were very critical and disconnected and disassociated, or you were loving and connected and you were caring to people, you go on a journey into different realms. And the more loving, the more selfless, the more giving from the right place you were, and the more kind of deepening and reflective of yourself, you actually end up going on a journey and meeting angels and archangels and archi, and they give you strength. And you also go on a journey back through all your past lives as you're going into that spiritual world. And there's parts where we're digesting our day and what's happening, but that's only, and we have dreams about it, but it's only a very small part of it. The bigger part is also where, a lot of people have heard of their Akashic records, and a lot of people think that you can just access them willy-nilly, in a moment. It's not the truth. You can access the astral realm quite easily, but to go into the Akashic, that's beyond it's kind of in beyond the astral world, beyond the soul world. It's in the spirit world, and it's not very easy if you're actually really connecting to it. And what happens is that when you go to sleep, the angels, they're based on how you've lived your day, they take that information and they give it to the archangels and so in the archive, and they put it into the Akashic records. And this is also what creates the ether and the of our world, how we are. And so if we have millions of people in negativity and fear and trauma who don't work on themselves, who are just carrying it and giving it to their children and their children's children, imagine what's happening. We're creating this world of trauma and fear and all of this stuff. And what I'm saying is also, when you become conscious of all these things, and you become conscious, not just I've had other lives, but way more important than that is that I'm going to have lives in the future. I'm going to, how do I want to create my future life? When the moment you think about that, you change your life, because you're like, oh, I need to be conscious of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And if I understand that how I live, how I think, what I do now will create my physical body, then I might start going, oh, I want healthy, beautiful, physical body. Maybe I didn't get it in this life, but I have an opportunity to do that. How do I do that? And so this is what I mean by the depth as well. And then I might go, oh, well, to do that, I actually have to first refine my astral body, which is my desires, my feelings, my wants, my likes, my dislikes. And I start going, hold on a sec, I can't just live my life by whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want, which is the culture that we have. I need to use my sense of I am to go, is this healthy? Is this wise? Is this good for me? How do I work through this? Another thing that I've heard a lot of people say, for example, is that anytime you don't like something, red flag, I'm running, as opposed to, well, okay, what is this? What's happening? What's bringing up for me? What challenge is this? How can I look within? How can I understand this? Right? So it's not being asked. And so when we start to go, by refining my astral body, I'm going to have a stronger etheric body, which is my life body, my body of vitality, how much energy I have, what I'm capable of doing, my body of ancestry, and so on. So, by refining that, I'm going to get stronger. But if I go really deep in understanding all this stuff, I might go, you know what? The etheric body holds a lot of my old, deepest, most challenging patterns. They're not ones you can change in 30 days, you know, they're ones it's like years. And also physical issues, maybe. And as I work on it and not give up and understand what I can do and how I can do it, essentially what happens is that I change my etheric body. So in my next life, I'm going to have a really much stronger physical body, much stronger mental ability to think, much stronger ability to deal with life's challenges. So leadership abilities. So what I say is that you cannot live fully without understanding these things, because when you do, you deepen. It's like you're not just searching for fleeting happiness. Not to say that you don't want happiness, you know, and joyfulness, but the joy or the happiness, that they have depth, they have richness, they have, it's like they have appreciation, like you really value it, right? Because you're understanding it's also a gift from the divine. And you know, and then you work with the divine in a way that helps them and helps you.
Yeah, that's what I was getting from. That's what really excited me, because so many people, they'd say, "Oh, isn't it a terrible situation? Look at what's happening in the world, and you know, what can we do?" And da 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 da. And you know, to realize that these, what we've created in the world collectively, is a result, as an outcome of collective thoughts and negative intentions and lack of love and kindness and compassionate ways of being within ourselves, you know, within each one of us. So that whole perspective, I think, of creating your future life and your current life, it's in your hands, and it is your responsibility. That's the gift of life itself. And I don't think enough people realize the potential and the power that they actually hold as spiritual beings to transform themselves, and to also to transform the collective and to evolve. And I think that's what we're all talking about at the moment, is this big shift of consciousness and frequency on the earth, that we could actually live in a really loving way, and we could live in an enlightened fashion with nature, with animals, with each other, through love, etc. But it's, I think what you're bringing to this is like a perspective about your own individual uniqueness, which is probably what's missing in the current prevailing new age sort of concepts, which generalize everything. I think that's what I'm noticing. That's what I picked up from reading your book anyway, that you can develop, you can look at the aspects of your own life and evolution, areas that you could be doing more, talents and abilities that you could be developing more. One area that I was interested to hear more about is this concept of soul numbness, which I think ties in with what we're talking about, where you think that you meditate, you do what perhaps you have a practice, you do yoga, but you're not really enlivened and fully flourishing on all levels and all dimensions. And
And it was,
sorry about that. You said that you've observed this in a lot of your clients, and you are curious to know what it is and what the consequences of that are.
Well, I observed it. Funny enough, I observed it in a lot of my clients, and I observed it a lot in psychics and a lot in spiritual teachers and in myself more than, I observed it and I was like, what is this numbness and lack of aliveness that I have? And part of it is all the things you're talking about. Was that it took me a long time to understand it, because it was a question that I had for maybe 10 years. And what I came to was the generalizations and the half truths. So whenever we generalize anything, there's often a half truth in it, because the higher truth is specific, I believe, and it's clear, this clarity, as opposed to haziness. And so the soul, whenever it hears half truths, there's a part of the soul that really recognized the truth as aliveness, is like, oh my God, I feel alive, I feel vibrant, I feel awakened, right? That's how the soul recognizes it. It's nourishing, it's strengthening, it's enriching. When there's lies, the soul can also often recognize lies and will go, oh, this doesn't feel good, it feels icky, or I want to reject this, or it's cold. Often there's a coldness and a and like a rejection within. And that sense of, oh, I think I'm being lied to or something. But when you bring half truths, meaning you say the truth 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 times, and then you just bring a bit of untruth, you bring a bit of a lie, you bring a bit of, often we don't recognize that, and especially in generalizations, we don't know. There's a part of the soul that just goes, oh, I'm just a bit numb. When we see it on TV all the time through the news, for example, there's something true, and a lot of it is, I mean, on the news, it's easier to actually see most of those lies. But, if we don't look into it, we don't know. And the more lies we have, the more we lie to ourselves, the more half-truths we have, the more the soul becomes numb and stuck, and it doesn't, and actually this is where our emotions become, we have hormonal issues, we become all over the place, or we can't hold our emotions, we're very we're either really numb, or we're very emotional, we're like we're not balanced, but we're also not alive, we feel depressed. All depression is actually connected to soul numbness and shutting down your heart. So when I realized that, I actually, again, it was like, oh my God, it's so important to tell the truth, as uncomfortable as it is, as like, oh, including to oneself. And, and to everybody, to have those conversations that are not pleasant, because truth is often confrontational, for example, but also it was like, I need to know how to discern. I want to learn how to discern, because especially in higher truths, in the spiritual realm, don't want to feed myself lies and have this soul numbness, which definitely leads to mental illness, to nervous system disorders, to headaches, to digestive system disorders because you can't digest things, to just depression, not, anxiety, not feeling alive.
Yeah. So that would really explain a lot of what's happening. There's an epidemic of depression, anxiety sweeping the Western world at the moment. And, it absolutely makes sense, because people are being dumbed down, they're on all levels, whether it be government, propaganda, or social media, education, even in the spiritual teaching world, of past practices and teachings that may have been relevant for other times, people trying to fit into those models, I feel, without necessarily recognizing what their soul is really asking for. And I know I've experienced that myself, and I feel like we often try to fit ourselves into something that we see, ideally we should be following that practice, but it's not really resonating. It's not really bringing that aliveness through us, and we're not resonating with it. But there seems to be a lack of people's ability to really tune in and really connect and know what does resonate with you as an individual, because we're all different. So one of the areas in the book, that one of the topics you talk about is channeling. And I know that I've become, quite skeptical of information that comes through channels. And I'm questioning, well, is that necessarily good information for everybody, for myself? Who is this person? Who is this entity? So could you perhaps share a little bit about your take on that area?
Definitely. And when I was in my 20s, I had experiences of channeling myself as well. So I'm talking from experience and having tried a lot of things. What I feel very strongly about is that we need to learn how to think for ourselves, and we need to develop a sense of self, not the egotistical self, the higher self, but it's still your sense of self, your wise self, your I am. And what happens in channeling pretty much every time is that the being comes in. You don't actually know the being, because when they come in, your sense of I am is either pushed out of you or squashed. And so that in questioning things, it was like, well, and I've studied a lot about evolution of humanity and the parts of the soul and the sense of self, which is the weakest part of us, is actually our I am. And if in evolution, it makes sense to me, we're meant to think for ourselves, and we're meant to really grow within our own wisdom, then to have a being that we don't know that comes in, and at the time that they come in, they possess us, as opposed to speak to us, and give us the ability to discern. So we have no discernment. We just say whatever they want us to say. To me, that's control. To me, that's suppressing. And so the more I thought about it, the more I was like, how can that come from a higher source? And the more I would understand about angels and archangels and what they want to give us, which is freedom, right? They guide us, but they're encouraging us towards freedom. The beings who channel, it's not about freedom. It's about them, their agenda, and the message that they want you to know. And from what I've learned, often those messages are not necessarily timely, or they want, they give you again lots of truth and then half truth and then lies, where, they'll say stuff like, you don't need to work on yourself or on the past, just be happy. It doesn't matter about other people. It doesn't matter about other people suffering, as long as you're happy. And when you actually really break it down, it's like, really, so you're saying I should be selfish. You're saying that I should feed that. You're saying that I shouldn't care about other people. It doesn't make sense, but I understand it. It's feel good. Who cares about others? Let me just care about myself, which doesn't come from a higher self, no matter how you look at it. And I might talk about selfishness in the sense of, look, sometimes you need time to yourself. Be selfish in that way. So there's always levels and layers. But that sense of, I don't care about anybody else as long as I'm okay, that is not part of evolution. That is something else. And so there's a lot of, and I've listened to a lot of channels as well at different times, and there was always tension inside of me, and that sense of like, who are you? Who are you really? And the wording and some of the most famous ones, then I would see like them encouraging people to take medicines that are not healthy, but saying this is amazing, and other things like that, where once the people have given over their trust, because it's this higher being that's channeling through me, but is it? Just because they say it and they look like it, is it? And then my biggest question also was, what is it that this person had to do to refine themselves to be that, I guess, to be able to hold that higher energy? And most of the time, for most of the people who channel, nothing. They're actually not the nicest people. I've met a lot of them. So again, they don't treat people well. They're very egotistical, very self-centered. And I'm like, so how could a higher being, like even an angel or an archangel or whatever, come and channel, or whatever higher beings they're talking about, Magdalene or Jesus or whatever, how could they channel through a being who's dirty, who's dark, who's sick, who has done nothing to purify themselves? It makes no logical sense. I'm very logical as well. So to me, it was like, anything that you do in spirituality that is a quick fix, or you don't have to do anything and you just connect and get information, never made sense to me. And the more I've learned from people who I do have a lot of respect for, the more they've explained that to me as well, that it's like, to even enter into spiritual world, you have to let go of any idea of the physical world. And a lot of the visionaries who bring information from it, they bring it through their own vision of how they envision it. And then they kind of meet that, and they're given some more information, but it's not pure, because they haven't cleansed and transformed and lived their life in a more, you know, holistic, let's call it, way, and more refined way. And so I just think there's a lot of logical thinking that we push away, and we go, oh, this person's somehow, they're unique, they're special, but we don't sit there and go, hold on a second, what have they done to deserve that? And would it be from the higher beings, or there's a lot of lower beings who want power and control? And maybe that's who they're actually channeling. These beings are so clever, and so I started learning so much about that as well.
Yeah, I could sort of compare it to the media channels. If you watch Sky News or the ABC or CNN, you're tuning into a particular agenda usually that has been that most of the presenters are aligned with. So you're tuning into that channel. I feel it's a similar thing with channels, that you're tuning into that, but you also need to, if you're listening to information, you need to digest it within yourself. And does it resonate? Is it real? Is it true? I mean, most of the channeling I've listened to is so general and so vague, and it's like, well, okay, that's all very nice, and perhaps it's for people who are looking for some way to be sort of rescued or saved, or have a vision of everything's going to happen, you don't have to do much, it's all, it doesn't really I don't think it's particularly helpful. I don't think it's really empowering for individuals to play their part, and I think it's very easy to be lazy, and to
Exactly. It's so much of that idea, I'm already perfect, I don't have to do anything, I'm perfect. And you hear it all the time thrown in the spiritual world, and it's like, what are you talking about? The divine spark of you, maybe, but there's a lot of other parts of you that create you. And why are we here? And that was my big question as well. Why are we here? I want to understand.
Yeah, that's what I really got from the book. It was activating more. There's always growth; it never ends, and we are evolving beings all the time, individually and collectively. So the last topic I just wanted for you to briefly touch on is probably a little bit related to looking at external sources. And there's a lot of people now doing plant medicine journeys, going to Peru or taking those medicines in Australia. And some people have had really, really profound transformations and connections with themselves, at deeper levels and clearings. But you're a bit skeptical about the effects and value of going on those using plant medicines and other kinds of substances, psychedelic substances. So what are your concerns?
Well, I feel it's similar to this channeling idea that I want the spiritual wisdom. I want the spiritual nourishment. I want the insight, but I don't want to do any work. Let me take a tablet. Let me take, ayahuasca. Let me drink something. I don't have to do anything. I don't really have, and what they don't understand, like I come from a culture of shamans. And, and I really, again, looked into them, and I feel like, well, firstly, this is a culture that was there long time ago, and I don't know how, not to say relevant, but how that right now I feel like we're meant to be moving in a different place to just, we don't live in that way, like when it started. And when they would do journeys like that, part of it was to go into the spiritual world, and you would have 12 shamans, so to speak, or medicine people for one person. And they would make sure that the soul of that person was safe. So 12 on one. And the person who would go into the spiritual world would have had to train for years and years and years, maybe, who knows, 20 years, maybe a long, long time, maybe more. So they were prepared, and it was a way, an initiation practice. And then I feel like things get popularized because it's easy. And it's like, well, I can, rather than be invited into the spiritual realm, I'm just going to bang on the door and I'm going to force my way in through this medicine. I don't know anything really about it. I don't know anything about the shaman. Usually the shaman is making a lot of money. They, or there's 1 on 30 people. How does that make sense when you're actually coming out with your soul? The people don't know anything about the world that they're going into. They've learned nothing about the soul, the spirit, the astral realm, the dangers of the astral realm, the beings that they might encounter, and how to know and discern. Their sense of I am is weakened greatly, or almost not there, or suppressed, because they're out of it. They're on a journey, and yes, they may be getting insights and help, but what they don't understand is that they're paying for that help because they don't see it. And what they pay with is their soul. And every person I've seen who's done it, and I have countless friends and countless people who have, and I've had to calm, down about that, is there's always pieces of their soul missing because it was a payment and they don't know. They're too numb to know. They're not connected. And what often happens when they come back, they're unbalanced, and maybe I'm not saying there was no positives. I can't say that, because maybe something opened up at their heart or a different perspective. Maybe, and maybe that's helpful. I'm not saying it's not, but they never hold it because it didn't come from their eye and they didn't work on it. So often it creates an addiction of, I want more of that. And all I have to do is, sit in the circle, drink this stuff, and I'm off. which is that drug-induced culture, as opposed to what do I need to do to refine myself to be invited into the spiritual world by the true higher beings? How do I need to face myself? How would they invite me into real higher world instead of, I have a lot of doubt that any of these people actually go into the spiritual world, but I'm very convinced that most of them go into the shadow astral world, even a world of fantasy, you know, a world of perfect, you know, whatever it is that they're dreaming about. And again, a world of confusion, a world that is not necessarily what the real soul and spiritual world is. And they get stuck there often, and they're, you know, as much as whatever they feel they've gained, they have no idea what they've also lost. And this is why I, you know, and it's the easy way. It's always the easy way. And to me, nothing that is really worthwhile in life is easy. I just don't believe that. You know, I think people can say, well, you can just, you're creating more challenges in your life or whatever it is. And I believe that there's always easier ways. But I don't believe that we came here for easy, because I believe that easy in itself doesn't allow depth and doesn't allow you to really grow. It's just like, oh, this is fun, but I'm still this shell of a person. But when I work on things and I deepen and I go through challenges and trials, I build that strength in myself. I build the confidence. I get to know myself. And, I build the tools for how to deal with situations in my life and how to really appreciate both myself, my life, other people, situations and scenarios. I become solid, deep person as opposed to a flaky, and again, this is not a judgment, but it's just what I've observed, person who's easily depressed, easily taken off balance, easily angered, easily affected, easily told what to do, and they follow it and can't think for themselves. And I think that, in this society of quick, fast, easy, instant, we're seeing the result of it. And it's not pretty, it's not pleasant.
Yeah, I think that's really spot on. And of course, there are people who are doing a lot of work on themselves and who are resilient in that situation, in that using medicines as well. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you'd like to share, because I think we're getting close to our time. And I know that you've got special online classes if people want to explore and work with you, and you're also doing some, I think, longer training courses now on your website. So perhaps we could wrap up, and you could just, and there's also a new deck of oracle cards coming out, I believe.
Heal Your Heart oracles. They're pretty honest and raw for people who are ready to feel their hearts and the pain and the trauma and also the beauty of their heart and work through with that and acknowledge. Yeah, in terms of I'm always learning, I never teach the same way twice. I never share the same way twice. Because I feel like you could be deepening every day. People who know me know there's no days that go by that I'm not learning something. I'm always doing, learning, listening, reading. And so when I teach, I try and bring as much wisdom and depth in terms of what I've learned and what I've gained. And, there's classes where people can join that are quite short, and they're, and some of them are free, that are master classes that are 3 or 4 hours long, some of them 2 hours, and it just gives you a little bit of kind of like what we're sharing here, and understanding. And then there's 2-day classes where people can go on a journey, especially into the secret language of your body and how to work with it and tune in and so on, and awaken your intuition more. And then I have taught ancestry type classes and understanding what is it that we've brought from our ancestors, not just the ones that we have now, but feminine, masculine archetype. These are really important topics. And then one of my signature classes now that I actually have been doing live since I was 25, so for quite a few years, and it's grown and evolved into a 9-day course with 1 day in between, so it becomes a 10-day course called Awaken the Healer Within. And this is really about diving in and getting to know yourself from every angle that you kind of foundationally think of, from the feminine, the masculine, the inner being within you, the victim archetype, the victorious part of you, the saboteur, all the chakras. And again, there's millions of books about chakras, but you probably would not have heard what I'm teaching, and the connections to the soul and the age and the different parts of you, and understanding the soul and the spirit, and really, I guess, releasing what doesn't work for you. But it's not just releasing, it's knowing and understanding and embracing and nourishing and strengthening who you really are and what is possible when you understand, like I said, the spiritual realm, understand yourself, understand the different possibilities, to when you can really awaken to aliveness inside yourself and really awaken your higher self and work with it in not a wishy-washy generalized way, but really by connecting to all the parts of yourself that have been stunted, that haven't been able to grow. And you don't need to have plant medicine for that. You need to be conscious to face your shadow from a place of great wisdom that is there in your consciousness, and to keep reawakening more and more and more of that. And the idea is to come out of this transformed and to have tools and an ability to heal yourself, to help others. We do a process with etheric hands, understanding all the subtle bodies, and how we can really work and in terms of healing, but also evolve. I really believe that healing without the understanding of evolution is not enough. So yeah, there's a lot in it.
It's been such a delight, Inna. You are such an example of what you are teaching. It's the aliveness that just shines through. It's fantastic. And I'm sure everyone's going to really get that when they watch this interview. So to contact you and see what you're offering, to subscribe, it's www or https Inna, Inna Segal, Segal.com. And there are master classes that you can go, you can register for online. And I would love to follow up to do another interview with you and talk about the ancestral aspects of influencing our healing and our spiritual journeys. I think that would be a fantastic topic. Yeah. So look, thank you so much. It's been really beautiful to meet you again and to imbibe your gorgeous, glowing, enlivening presence. And I'm looking forward to finishing the book and doing some more of the exercises.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd love to talk about ancestry. It's very powerful.
Yeah, that would be great. So if you'd like to know more about the Conscious Living Show and subscribe, just go, and there will be articles up, and the interview will be up on our magazine site, consciouslivingmagazine.com.au. And we look forward to our next interview, and stay tuned for more expanding consciousness, enlivening conversations.